Okay, welcome everyone to a new episode of Technique Tuesday. This week we're going to be looking at how to perform the squat with perfect technique. Now, the back squat is often referred to as the king of lower body exercises and even the king of all exercises. And that's an appointment I think it actually deserves. Before we jump into the technique for this exercise, let's take a look at what muscles we're going to be targeting with this movement first. So with the squat, we're training simultaneous hip extension, where the hips straighten out on the way up, and knee extension, where the knees straighten out. Now, the hip extension component will be handled primarily by the glutes, getting some assistance from the adductor magnus. And even though the hamstrings can perform hip extension, they actually don't contribute much to the squat at all because of the bent knee, meaning their muscle length doesn't change much throughout the range of motion. The knee extension component will be handled by the quadriceps and will be performing an isometric lumbar extension contraction, which will be handled by the spinal erectors of the lower back. Now, another very common misconception is that the abs are highly active in the squat, but that simply isn't true. EMG data shows low abdominal activity in the squat, which makes sense given that their function is spinal flexion and anti-extension, neither of which occur in the squat. So we're mainly looking at the glutes, quads, and spinal erectors as the muscular targets of the squat. And because the squat involves multiple joints and large muscle masses, it's very conducive to progressive overload and should be trained with relatively heavy weight in a low to moderate rep zone. And while there are exceptions, doing squats for greater than 10 reps or so will usually cause your cardiovascular system to fatigue before your leg musculature, leading to sloppy form, worse strength gains, and lower muscle activation. Now, generally, I recommend loading the squat with at least 70% of your 1 rep max, or in the 5 to 10 rep zone if your goal is primarily hypertrophy, and the 3 to 6 rep zone if your goal is primarily strength. And again, there will be exceptions to this. And now, it's important to be very objective about where your form stands and possibly consider lightening the weight on the bar for a few months while you master the technique, and then you can build your way back up to your previous loads with good form. A few months of not going as heavy as possible will be far better than taking a few months off due to an injury from lifting beyond your capability. Before approaching the bar, do a quick check to make sure you have the right weight on both sides and that the bar is centered in the rack. You want to position the bar height so that when you unrack the bar, you aren't hitting the J hooks during the walkout. And for most bar positions, around armpit height will be a good height. Now, for reasons I've discussed in another video, which I'll link below, I think people actually exaggerate the practical difference between a high bar squat with the bar resting up on your traps and a low bar squat with the bar resting down on your rear delts. Now, research shows that ultimately the high bar squat may be a bit more quad dominant and the low bar squat may be a bit more hip dominant. Now, in my experience, I think the high bar squat tends to protect the lower back more and tends to feel a bit more comfortable for many people. So we'll be squatting with the high bar position here. Now, the bar is too high if it's pushing your head forward, and it's too low if it feels like it's gonna slide down your back. You wanna position your hands as comfortably close to your shoulders as possible, as a closer grip here will activate the muscles of the upper back better, leading to a more stable base of support for the bar. Your hands should merely be stabilizing the bar, keeping it mashed between your palms and your upper back, so you shouldn't be actively gripping the bar like you would in a bench press, and just let it really sit and settle in there on your upper back. So with both feet underneath the bar, you want to push your hips forward to unrack the bar, and don't make the common mistake of squatting the bar up with your knees, as this will cause unnecessary quad fatigue before the actual lift itself and can contribute to knee pain. You want to take 3 steps backward, 1 small step with your non-dominant leg, 1 medium step with the other leg, and then a 3rd mini step to get your feet even. Once your feet are set, they should be planted with about a 15 to 30 degree foot flare. In general, you just want to make sure that your feet are at least wider than shoulder width. Now that you've got the squat set up, it's time to actually execute the lift, and we're going to split this up into 3 distinct phases: brace, descend, and lift. So for the bracing phase, your heel and big toe should be making even pressure on the ground, meaning your weight should be centered on the middle of your foot. I don't really like the cue to keep your weight on your heels, since it can throw your balance off and cause your hips to shoot up early. You really want to have your weight evenly distributed across the entire foot. Your head should be slightly extended with your eyes gazing straight ahead, and your elbows should be pointing slightly back. So try not to position them directly under the bar, which can lead to elbow pain. You want to pull a huge breath of air deep into your diaphragm, pushing your gut out against your belt to create a solid, rigid column down your spine. Now you're fully braced and ready to begin the descent. Now for the high bar position, you want to break at the hips and the knees at the same time. So just looking at the knees first here, you want to push your knees forward and slightly out so that they track in the same direction as your toes, while at the same time sitting your hips straight down. You should be pushing through your heel, big toe, and pinky toe throughout the eccentric, keeping an even weight distribution through your feet. And when viewed from the side, the bar path should be a perfectly straight line, moving straight down, centered directly over the middle of the foot. You want to lower the bar under control, actively driving your upper back into the bar and not allowing your chest to fall forward. You don't want to descend excessively slowly to the point where you start to lose gas too early. And generally, you only want about a 1 second negative on the squat. Now, when it comes to squat depth, I recommend at least squatting parallel to the ground as a minimum standard for hypertrophy and general strength. However, for regulation technique, you technically do need to get the hip crease below the knee joint, meaning you will have to go below parallel. And I think most people should be able to squat to this depth when using a high bar position and with the appropriate stance width for particular skeleton and mobility. So this position is what we'd call being in the hole. Unless you're doing paused squats as a specific training drill, you generally don't want to pause in the hole at all, but rather take advantage of the stretch reflex at the bottom and then immediately reverse the motion the second you hit depth. And although you do want to maintain an erect, upright posture during the positive, I'm not a big fan of the chest up cue myself, since it can cause some trainees to lean too far backward. I prefer to think about driving your back up into the bar while keeping your head slightly up, which is going to pull the spine into a good lifting position. Now remember that with the squat, we're trying to move heavy weight and maximize our strength potential. So don't worry about squeezing any muscles or feeling the burn or anything like that. You want to explode out of the hole as if you were trying to jump through the ceiling. Now I personally keep my breath held until about 2/3 of the way up, at which point I exhale. And once I'm back up to the top, I'll begin the bracing phase again, take another deep breath in, and then repeat for however many reps my program calls for. Now, because there are so many errors with the squat, I may have to just do another video on just the mistakes alone. I did actually do one myth bust video explaining why you should actually let your knees come forward past the toes and why the cue to keep your knees behind the toes can actually be harmful to the lower back, and I'll link that in the description below. Now, but other than that, I would say one really common error that I see is knee valgus, or having the knees cave in, either on the negative or the positive. This usually stems from lack of proper hip external rotation. So you want to make sure your feet are adequately flared out, which will help. And then you want to actively think about driving your knees out in the direction of your toes, but not excessively beyond the direction of your toes. And simply placing a mini band or hip circle around your knees can help to cue for this and strengthen the hip abductors. And wearing a heeled squat shoe can also help here, since foot pronation, or losing your arch, is a known contributor to knee valgus. The other two common errors usually come as a 2-for-1 deal here, going too heavy and not going deep enough, because the squat, unlike say the deadlift, starts with the eccentric phase. So it's so much easier to cheat by loading up the bar with more weight than you can handle and then only going half the way down. Whereas on the deadlift, if you can't lift the weight, then it just stays where it is on the ground. So it's a little bit harder to cheat on that one. Now you also want to be careful with butt wink or lower back rounding here. And if your back is excessively rounding on the squat, you may want to start cutting your depth a bit shorter, or just modify your stance width, either more or less wide. But I think that some degree of butt wink is basically an inevitability for many lifters and isn't a cause for too much concern, especially if it's mild and isn't causing any pain or discomfort. Foam rolling and dynamic stretching before squatting will also increase joint range of motion acutely and may help reduce butt wink as you hit depth. So if you can't squat due to injury, which I think really is the only reason you shouldn't be squatting, the first thing I'd recommend is some kind of machine or hack squat, or even a Smith machine squat if you find that to be more comfortable. Lunges are great as well, but won't have that same overloading potential as the squat will. And as a last resort, I'd say a leg press plus a lower back extension captures a decent amount of what the squat is training. Okay, so that is all that I have for the squat. Before you guys click out of the video just yet, I want to let you know I just just launched a new squat program on my website. It's a 10-week program, and it has some squat variation hit 4 times per week with volume tapering down to a new 1-rep max test in week 10. And I would say that if you've been trying to get your squat up, there's absolutely no way that this program won't increase your squat max. I would say if you do run it for the 10 weeks and you don't set a new PR, just send me an email and I'll send you a full refund for the program. And I'm actually launching this program for just $12.99 for this week, and it's gonna go up to $19.99 after that. So to give you some idea here, this is week 1, day 1. So you have all the squat work and then all the lower body accessory work programmed in for you, plus coaching notes from me. But the upper body work is flexible, so you should be able to really easily fit this squat routine into your current routine. And I do give some guidance on how you can set that up with different splits. So anyway, you guys can learn more about that if you're interested on jeffnipper.com. And like I said, it'll be 35% off up until next Tuesday only. So if you're wanting to grab it, take your squat to the next level, you can check that out at the first link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Leave me a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future Technique Tuesday episodes. And I'll see you guys all here next Tuesday for the